What is good, guys? It's Ray J back with another video, and this one I'm going to be breaking down what's going on with Apple stock and talk about why on earth this stock is going to affect the entire market. Talk about some big events that involve Apple very soon, and why you need to be watching it for the next 2 weeks because this is going to have a big effect on Tesla and SPY. But before I break anything down about why on earth that is and talk about some important levels, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm personally not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, in just about 10 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market and Apple. So, when it comes to Apple, just as a reminder, compared to what I was saying earlier, on Apple on the daily chart, it is still trying to respect this uptrend, but it's showing more and more signs of exhaustion. Right? We saw the volume slow down a little bit, and then on top of this, even though it has this gap and it could just try to like pop a little bit more before it starts to sell off, in my opinion. Uh, Even though that's the case, I just want to mention that right now there's no like guarantee it even like pops to 190 at this point. I say this because we have this bearish divergence as well on Apple, just like how we did on Tesla a couple of days ago, which led to the sell off. And we have more and more signals suggesting that Apple is losing lots of momentum. But why am I talking about Apple? What does this have to do with Tesla and the market? Well, in case you guys didn't know, Apple is an absolute giant, and Apple dictates the market by a long shot, in my opinion. One of the reasons why the market was pumping so hard was because Apple had this big announcement that came out. Apple announced that for September 12th, they have a launch event and they could be announcing the launch of their new iPhone or even excuse me, the new Apple Watches. So if that ends up being the case, that's great for them, but you have to remember that after these events we tend to see Apple sell off, but approaching them we tend to see it pump. So when this news came out, Apple started pumping and pumping and pumping, and that's awesome. But the problem is we're showing signs of buyer exhaustion. We're approaching some critical resistance around this 190 zone, which is where the gap happens to be. And then on the 30 minutes time frame on Apple, we have a clear bearish divergence. On the MACD, we have a triple bearish divergence, not to mention on the RSI. So whether it fills the gap or not, I'm not too sure about. We could just have already topped on Friday, and this thing could be getting ready to sink as soon as Tuesday. So if Apple starts sinking, okay, it's going to affect the whole market. But I don't think it's going to sink in a straight line. I don't think it's just going to crash forever. Let me show you what I think Apple may end up doing. So this is Apple's share price right here, right? I actually have this vertical line right here, this blue line right here. You guys can see this vertical line. This is the date of the event, September 12th, and that's when Apple has the launch event. So approaching it, I have two possibilities, basically like this one and this one right here. So either Apple could get one little pop to try to fill this like 190 gap around here. And I think that because it's so overbought, and I forgot to show you guys this, but on the 4 hour time frame, Apple is very overbought. It's at the 75 RSI. It hit 80 many times. And when the RSI hits these extremes, we tend to see it slow down shortly after, at least temporarily. It doesn't have to be a big crash. It needs to just cool off on the RSI. I think it's due for a very healthy pullback. And the 4 hour MACD is about to curl. So I do believe the time is coming very soon. So let's break down what this basically means. I think, okay, that Apple it's either going to gap up on Tuesday, and I'm saying Tuesday because the market is going to be closed for Monday for Labor Day, by the way, in case you guys don't remember. Uh, it might gap up to fill that gap, completes the bearish divergence and just starts sinking from there, or it might just start sinking immediately. There are two possibilities, most likely, in my opinion. It may continue to sink and sink and sink for a couple of days to cool off the RSI, and I think it could come all the way down to like 186, if not 185, around this area, maybe even lower depending on how aggressive it is. But then it may sink approaching like Thursday or Friday of next week, right? But then after that, when we approach September 11th, the week of the big event, I think that for Monday, which is going to be September 11th, and then also the Tuesday as we approach the event, right before the event starts, we have some like trading to do as well, right? So I think it might uptrend approaching the event, and this is when the market may bounce. And then, after the event, I don't know if Apple's going to continue pushing or if it ends up like selling off. I really don't know. it does have a tendency of selling off after big events. So I know this is some high volatility, but I do believe that this is very probable as to what's going to happen. A slight cool off on Apple, then a really nice bounce after a couple of trading days, a push up approaching its event, and then it just, it could sink afterwards. It all depends on what on earth is announced. Now, that's important because on SPY, this may dictate SPY as well, and also Tesla. Now, for SPY, we could see something like this play out. It all depends on Apple. I don't know if we're going to just push up a little bit to form like a head and shoulders up here. I really don't know that. It depends if this is like a left shoulder, the head and the right shoulder could be forming. If we just pop a little bit and just start sinking, or if we gap up a little bit more and get one last pop, depending on Apple and where on earth it's, if it fills the gap or not, wherever it goes. I don't know which one's going to be, to be honest with you. All of these are a possibility. So I need to see what happens with the news for Tuesday, what happens during the pre-market, but we could see this thing try to push up and then start sinking as time goes on. And there's a very, very good chance that this thing could retest 448. And if that breaks, 446.5 could be tested, 445, but the critical support is going to be 444. If 444 breaks, then the market could start sinking even lower. It all depends on what news comes out, the other factors, other catalysts, which I will talk about later on. But I do believe with Apple potentially sinking, there's a high probability the market may do something like this, especially because on SPY we have this triple bearish divergence just like Tesla that has been developing. On the 30 minutes time frame, there's a bearish divergence. We have a triple bearish divergence as well. Same thing on the MACD, and then on the 4-hour time frame, just like Apple, we also developed this sign of exhaustion because every time we popped, the market just ended up selling off for most of the day. It happened on Thursday, also on Friday. We have a bearish cross on the MACD, but we're not truly extremely bearish or more bearish until we close below like 450. I just am anticipating that it's eventually going to happen. So eventually watch for that 450 area. If we close below it, then SPY should be sinking. But basically, we might start to see the sell-off. I think the odds favor this very, very healthy pullback. That's going to be completely normal. There's nothing out of the ordinary to expect this. And Apple may cause SPY to sink all the way down below 448, if not as low as like 445 or so. That's a real possibility. And once we hit that by the later days of next week, which I think is very possible, then we could get a very nice bounce and start pushing back to 450. But, this is going to be approaching Apple's event. I don't know if Apple's going to sink lower again and then we kind of like reject again like this, or if we just keep going. I'm not too sure about that. It depends on what Apple announces and how it reacts. That is going to be very tricky to predict. But Apple is going to be the biggest thing for the next 2 weeks, in my opinion. I think Apple is going to dictate the entire flow. So then what about for Tesla? How do I see this playing out? Honestly, guys, Tesla's a little tricky to predict because we look really weak. I don't really want to call out like the next 2 weeks. That's really difficult to predict. But I believe, like I said in my earlier video, this thing might either get like a rebound thanks to Apple and the market kind of like pushing a little bit before this thing starts sinking towards this 440 area, if not 438-ish, or it could just go straight down to like four. I'm sorry, did I say four? I meant to 238. Sorry about that, guys. 240 to 238 on Tesla. Or it could just sink straight down to like the 238 area, then try to bounce from like a head and shoulders. Those are like the two possibilities. It all depends on what happens with the news involving the company and also how Apple ends up reacting. So we could be forming a head and shoulders. It all depends on what news comes out. But either way, I do see a very high probability of the imbalance over here attracting Tesla. So if we do get a balance, it depends on like Apple and other factors, and we could get a rejection off 248 to 250, come back down like this. And as the days go on, Tesla could just slowly sink down like this, come back to this imbalance area, and then make an attempt to bounce. That's just like one possibility. And it's a real possibility, but it's not a guarantee. There's also the possibility of us, if we are going to visit that imbalance, we could just like sell off immediately all the way down here pretty quickly over the first couple of days, then make an attempt to bounce for like a right shoulder. And if we get another very bad piece of news, we could see Tesla sink even lower into like the lower 230s. But 234 tends to be very strong support. So we're going to be watching that as well, and maybe these other levels. It all depends on how we react to these support and resistance levels. I'm not going to try to predict it for Tesla. It's a little trickier to predict since we dropped so hard. Instead, I'm just going to tell you that we either bounce a little bit, then we start sinking towards these lower levels, down like in this 238 to 240 area. That seems very probable. Or we just go there immediately and then try to bounce. It's got to be one of those two. and I'm just going to be watching Tesla. I think Apple is going to have a big effect on the whole market, and this flow that is forming is going to affect Tesla too. Okay, so hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully this video gave you guys more insight on one of the biggest events for the next week and a half for the markets. Apple is going to be very telling. It's going to dictate how this market moves, and I think it's very important to be paying very close attention to what this thing ends up doing. Anyways, with that said, thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. I want to keep this one nice and short for the weekend. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace out.